Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Sourav Mukherji, Professor of Organizational Behavior and Human Resources Management at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, as our distinguished guest on today's podcast episode. In addition to his teaching role, Professor Mukherji also serves as the Dean of Alumni Relations and Development and Dean Faculty at IIM Bangalore. Professor Mukherji's research focuses on inclusivity and social enterprises, businesses that address the need of the poor in financially sustainable ways. In this area, he has published numerous case studies and papers in both academic and practitioner-oriented journals. His contributions have been recognized through a UNDP Fellowship for Research in Inclusive Business Models and Wilgrow Fellowship for Research on Social Entrepreneurship. At IIM Bangalore, Professor Mukherji has held key leadership roles, including Dean of Academic Programs, Chairperson of the MBA program, and the Chairperson of Placements. He played a vital role in securing EQUIS accreditation, mentoring IIM Visakhapatnam, and advancing IIM Bangalore's online education initiatives. He also serves on the board of several educational and non-for-profit institutions. Professor Mukherji teaches postgraduate and doctoral courses at IIM Bangalore with expertise in organization design and research interests focused on sustainability and inclusivity. Before joining academia, he gained industry experience with IBM and Oracle in product management and later worked as a strategy consultant with the Boston Consulting Group. Beyond his professional pursuits, he is passionate about sports, enjoys running, and is keen on translating lessons from the sporting arena into management practice. A passionate educator, Professor Mukherjee is highly regarded by both MBA students and industry professionals in executive education programs. His excellence in teaching has been recognized with the IMB Alumni Award for Faculty of the Year as well as the IBM Faculty Award. In this episode, Dr. Sourav Mukherjee discusses his book, Inclusive Business Models, Transforming Lives and the Creating Livelihoods, which explores how innovative business approaches can generate both social impact and sustainable livelihoods. It is my pleasure to now welcome Dr. Sourav Mukherjee to the conversation. Professor Mukherjee, it is my honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you.
Professor, what inspired you to write inclusive business models? Was there a defining moment or case that convinced you of the need to analyze inclusive approaches systematically?
Yes, I think I can trace it back to my senior at IIT Kharagpur, Dr. Harish Hande, who actually founded this very inspiring organization called Selco. And since Harish was my senior, I was in touch with him. And after I joined IIM Bangalore as a faculty member around 2003, I would meet him and I would travel with him to find out that the kind of work he was doing in rural Karnataka. Harish, by that time, had already got a doctorate in energy engineering. And what he was trying to do was to figure out how he can provide energy solutions to the poor. What struck me very interesting about Harish was that while I thought that if you're talking about the poor, you have to give them products or service free of cost, Harish said that no, I will actually sell the solar lights to them and I will create a sustainable business model. So he was not talking of a model that was based on charity or philanthropy, but he was thinking of selling the solar lights to the poor and ensuring that it's a viable business proposition. And I used to wonder that whether it is ever possible to do that because the poor don't have capability to pay. But somehow I, at that point of time, did not understand how Harish would get it done. But later on, I was attending a conference in Europe in this place called Bratislava, where I met a representative from UNDP. And he said that UNDP has a division called Inclusive Business Models. And he explained to me that these are models where you address the needs of the poor, but you don't do it on a charitable model. You create a business model around that. So then the two of them fell together, and I realized that this is what Harish was talking about. And I came back and started studying deeply what Harish was practicing. And by that time, Harish had established his company. His company was doing reasonably well. And I could understand that how he was at the core of it applying business principles But at the same time, this is what we would call as compassionate capitalism, that you apply business principles, but you use it to solve problems of poverty, uh, problems for people whose problems are usually not solved by the free markets. So if you call me, if I think of it, that would be the defining moment. After that, I decided that this field where there is an intersection of business doing something good at the same time applying business principles, this is something that I would like to teach at IIM Bangalore. So I started writing case studies on such inspirational incidences, and then I started offering this particular course called Inclusive Business Models.
Very insightful. Professor, when we talk about inclusive business models, what exactly do we mean? And how do these models go beyond traditional CSR or philanthropy?
Right. So when we talk of CSR and philanthropy, it is very clear that you are not building a business model there. You are saying that my business will never be profitable because, so I think while a for-profit business would try to maximize profitability, inclusive business models maximize social impact, and social impact can be defined in various ways. But fundamentally, the notion of inclusivity is built into it. That means I am providing, say, education, I'm providing healthcare, I am to the poor, I am helping the poor farmer to enhance his income. So, inclusivity and impact is at the core of the business. And we are saying that we will not be maximizing profitability, but we will be financially viable, which means we will break even. We will not have to go and raise money from donors or charitable foundations, and we will have investors. So today, that in India we have started the social stock exchange. So hence there will be people who will be putting money in these businesses as investors, but they will not get the kind of returns you would expect from putting money in a regular for-profit enterprises.
Dr. Mukherjee, your book emphasizes cross-sector comparisons. Can you share an example where learning from one sector significantly reshaped the understanding of inclusivity in another?
Yes. So, what I realized when I was writing case studies was that the challenges of every sector are very different. If you look at providing healthcare to the poor, that is a very different challenge compared to providing, say, education to the poor, or if you want to enhance the income of the farmer. Yet at the same time, there are certain principles which can be applied across these sectors. And one example can be something like a paraskilling. So, what does effectively paraskilling means? Paraskilling means that you pick up a job or an activity which is today being done by an expert. And if something is done by an expert, then it costs money because experts are not easy to get. Simple demand and supply conditions in the labor market would tell you that experts come at a high price. But what social entrepreneurs or people who are looking at inclusive business model have done, they're saying that, well, maybe certain part of that job can be done by a set of people who are not necessarily experts. And I will give you two examples, one from healthcare sector and one from the education sector. If you look at what Arvind Eye Care has done with the vision of Dr. V, what they have said is that a cataract surgeon earlier used to spend a lot more time with a patient. Now, to enhance his or her productivity, you cut down the time that the cataract surgeon spends with the patient, and you allow the pre processing of the patient and the post operative care of the patient to be done by people who are not doctors. So, these are typically paramedics. And since paramedics do not command such high salary as a ophthalmologist or as a surgeon, you can do it at a lower cost. And minimizing cost is very important for inclusive business models because if you lower cost, only then it becomes affordable. Now, this same principle is also being applied by Professor Pankaj Jain in his inclusive education model called Gyanshala. And I've talked about it in my book. Where he says is that, typically in an academic institute, a teacher does everything. I mean, he or she does the design, he does the delivery, like what I do. Whereas when you're saying that when you're talking about education to the poor, maybe you cannot afford such a high-end teacher. So what do I do? You centrally design, and then the delivery can be done by para teachers who are not necessarily the one who can design a course, but who can deliver a course. So what he does is that his courses, and these are typically for children who are probably growing up in a slum on a very challenged economic background, who are even out of the school system. And what Gyanshala tries to do is to prepare the children to get into the school system. Now, here you can't have high paying teachers coming and, taking the classes. So what he does is his team centrally designs the curricula. His team has people who have done, good degrees in education, right, including himself. But the delivery is done by people who are maybe just class 10th or class 12th pass. And they follow instructions. They are not doing designing. They have been told very clearly how to run a class of, say, 30 or 40 minutes. So you see the application of para skilling as a concept that can be applied both in education as well as in teaching, as well as in healthcare. And it certainly helps us to reduce the cost of service delivery.
The book includes several case studies, as you have mentioned. Could you highlight one that particularly illustrate both the challenges and the transformative potential of inclusive business models?
Certainly, I think my favorite case has always been Selco, because that's probably the one where I started understanding this whole field, and Harish has always been a big inspiration for me. Now, to sell a solar light to the poor, especially, is very challenging because the price of the solar light that Selco sells is more than the income of the people whom he is going to sell it. So somebody who has such low income, I mean, how do you sell a solar light to them? And naturally, you need to arrange for financing. But banks initially were very reluctant to lend for solar lights because they thought that solar light is a consumer durable and it doesn't really have any source of income attached to it. And banks would typically finance you if you are buying something which can generate income for you. So Harish and his team had to carve out a very interesting argument, a very powerful argument, saying that how a solar light can enhance income of a poor villager. Say, for example, and there are several examples of it in the case study, but I'll give you the one which is probably easy to explain. What they found out was that a pushcart vendor actually buys 15 rupees worth of kerosene every day. And if he or she is given the solar light, and a bank lends money to this pushcart vendor, then over a 2 to 3 year period, it can vary depending upon the place. Over a 2 to 3 year period, the pushcart vendor can pay back the bank the entire loan by paying only 10 rupees per day. So what is happening is instead of spending 15 rupees per day to buy a kerosene lamp, or buy the kerosene for his lamp, the solar light is costing him 10 rupees per day. And after end of these 3 years, he has an asset. And when they made this business model, then it was possible to sell that solar light to the pushcart vendor. But that's fantastic, right? When you look at how he did the financing model. But since you talk of transformative, something else has also happened now. A pushcart vendor is not a bankable person. A bank refuses to lend to a pushcart vendor because the pushcart vendor doesn't have an asset. But when he buys this solar light and after he clears his debt, he now has an asset. Because typically these solar lights would survive for 7 or 8 years with proper maintenance. So now what we have done is we have not only replaced his polluting source, that is kerosene, with a renewable source, which is solar light. We have also saved some money for him because every day instead of paying 15 rupees, he has paid 10 rupees. And he has also now become bankable with his asset. And now he's probably has some amount of credit score also with the bank. So now that is transformative for the person because now the person no longer needs to come to the Selco to actually improve his business or borrow some money. And this is the fascinating part of it. This is the inspiration part of it, that if you can think of a business model like this, then you really change the lives of the poor.
Professor, India has been described as a hub for inclusive business experiments. What makes India uniquely positioned to generate and test these models?
I think it is our inequality. It's a bit unfortunate, but I think that is what reality is. You and I who are very privileged grew up seeing inequality and poverty all around us. If you think of Africa, now I have never been to Africa, so I'm generalizing a bit, but what I'm told is that in Africa there is quite a bit of poverty, but you don't see so many privileged people around. If you go to Western Europe or US, they are typically rich. I mean, there the number of poor people are very less. But in India, the poor and the rich, the privileged and the unfortunate grow up side by side, chicken joe. And hopefully there is something in our in academic system, something in our philosophy that tells to people like you and me that if you have been privileged and if you have been able to find your feet in life, then there is a responsibility of giving back. And that giving back, we have this tremendous base of talent, which can be very innovative, which can be very entrepreneurial. And innovation always happens close to where the problem lies. It is very difficult to be innovative for a problem which lies 10,000 kilometers away from me. So since you and I have grown up seeing these challenges, hence you see people like Harish Hande, people like Dr. Ashwin Naik, and somebody like Dr. Uh, Devi Sethi, who, while themselves are fantastic in their own professions as engineers and doctors, have constantly felt that how can I do this innovation to address the needs of the poor in my own way. So I think it's the contrast, it is the inequality, as well as our education system and broad philosophy. It's a combination of all of this. And we have a lot of poor people, right? So unfortunately, it's also becomes a nice experimental ground where we can try out different models and try and see what works, what does not work. It takes a tremendous amount of trial and error for a social entrepreneur to finally create a business model that is viable. And I think India offers you that opportunity.
Professor, how can entrepreneurs and practicing managers use the analytical framework in your book to evaluate or design their own inclusive business models?
See, what I have try to do in my book is to say that what are the broad learnings that I have from these case studies. At the heart, I'm an academic, I'm an educationist. And what are we looking for as an educationist? We are looking for patterns. And when I see those patterns, then I am hoping that it will cut down the learning time for others, right? In the absence of any model, people will try out, people will make mistakes, and then they will do probably the right thing. That's exactly what all these entrepreneurs did. If you look at Harish's journey, or you look at Ashwin's journey, if you look at Pankaj Jain's journey, all of them have iterated so many times till they finally got a model which works. Now, when I'm writing in my book, since I've captured them, I have actually shown that what has worked and what has not worked. So hopefully, this will cut down the learning time of next generation entrepreneurs. And they will understand that what is possible and what is not. So the hope is they will make lesser mistakes. I mean, you have to learn by doing mistakes in life. There is no two ways about it. But hopefully you will make lesser mistakes. You will be able to get your model up and running faster than the first generation of social entrepreneurs.
One of the persistent challenges in inclusive businesses is balancing financial sustainability with social impact. What insights from your research can help leaders strike this balance?
It is the most difficult balance. And I think the challenge has always been that of scale. Right? So there are these three things which you have to always keep eye on. One is the financial viability, the social impact, and the scale. And unfortunately, in some models, as you scale, your financial viability increases, fortunately, because the advantage of economies of scale come in, but then you start reducing the social impact. And I don't think there is any easy way of breaking this trade off, except the fact that this is where we need the biggest of innovations. How can I scale up my model even while ensuring that I am creating the social impact? I am still addressing the needs of your target customer, your target clients, right? Is it the poorest of the poor, or is it something? Because we have seen in some of the sectors, especially that has happened in our micro lending sector, that as they scaled, they forgot their core mission, which was to lend money to the poor and lend in a manner so that the poor can pay it back. And the history of Indian microlending industry would show that there has been overlending, there has been multiple lending to the same people simply because they probably wanted to make their numbers and they wanted to scale up. And this is typically called a mission drift in something. So it's a very difficult balance to maintain. And sometimes people have to take a very hard call saying that, no, I will not scale myself because scaling is a challenge. So what is the way out? The way out is what we call replication. So he's saying that, well, the challenge is my organization itself will not grow, but I will inspire other entrepreneurs to take up very similar challenge and create their organizations. Because and this is something that Harish has always told, saying that the energy problem in rural Karnataka is different from the energy problem in rural Bihar. And so Selco, while it is very effective in rural Karnataka, may not be as effective in rural Bihar or rural Bengal. And it needs an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur from a Bengal or a Bihar who understands the context sensitivity of the model and then modifies it accordingly. So yes, maybe one way out is to constantly think that how can we create more social entrepreneurs rather than creating very large organizations, because moment to create very large organizations become very standardized in order to control, and then naturally the social impact part gradually gets diluted.
Dr. Mukherjee, you mentioned that parts of the book are relevant for courses on social enterprises, developmental economics, and human resource management worldwide.
Yeah.
How do you see this book contributing to global discussions on inclusive business education?
I think we need to bring inclusivity into much more clearly into our education system, especially institutes of higher education, especially institutes which are talking about management, which are talking about business, and which are talking about public policy. And while there is research going on multiple parts of the world about inclusivity, I still think that it is much lower than what is necessary, and hence this can serve as a starting point. I mean, somebody as a teacher, if he or she wants to start a course. For example, what happened to me when I thought of starting a course in 2009, I was thinking about it 2008 2009 of starting a course in inclusive business model. I did not have case studies to talk about in the class, right? I mean, and as a result, I thought that, well, how will I run a course of 20 sessions if I don't have case studies which are from India, because this is such a context specific subject that I can't pick up a case study from, say, US or Nigeria to come and talk in the class. One or two may be there, but not all 20 of them. Now, today, at least you have a starting point with all these 10 cases that I have written, and you can pick and choose, and you can say, okay, at least I can get going, I can start my course. And once you become, much more conversant with the course, maybe the teacher himself or herself can go out and write more case studies, and today there are a lot more cases out there also. So that way it should be helpful.
What are some effective ways to measure the long-term impact of inclusive business models on both livelihoods and organizations?
Measurement has always been a challenge in the social sector. It is easy to measure financial impact. It is easy to measure something like return on investment. But how are you impacting the lives of the people in a positive manner is very difficult to measure. Having said that, there are measures which have evolved over a period of time, something like a social return on investment, which is subjective in nature, but I think it's a good start. There are also, much more rigorous ways of understanding impact, such as, the one called the randomized control trials, which are done by organizations such as JPAL. They're expensive, they take time, but it's a very rigorous way of doing things. So yes, it is, different sectors will have to evolve the most effective way of measuring their impact. It is complicated, but that does not mean that we should not be doing it, because the social investors are asking for measures of impact, and hence it has to be evolved. At the same time, we must keep in mind that it cannot be purely in the short term. Social impact always happens in the longer term, and that's where the entire concept of theory of change comes in. That if you really want to see the impact of education on the poor, the real impact will come maybe after 15 years in terms of understanding whether my education has been able to create proper livelihood for the person. But in between these 15 years, what are those measures? What are those output measures? What are those outcome measures which you can measure? what are those metrics which you can measure so that you know that you are on the right path.
Professor, my last question. As we move into a future shaped by technology, climate change, and shifting demographics, what do you see as the next frontier for inclusive business models?
So I don't know so much about technology. I am sure that it will play a very important part, but I see a lot of convergence between the challenges of climate and poverty, especially in a country like ours. And hence these two must merge. If you and once again, if you go to the case of Selco, you will find that Harish was, it's actually one of those few cases in my book which addresses both these concerns, and the other case being Hasirudala, where we are talking about waste management and creating an inclusive business around it, where both of these are big problems of our time, right? Managing waste and non-renewables and renewables. And I think increasingly these two has to come together. It is especially important for India because in India we still have a lot of poor people. And the history of nations have told us that as people's economic condition improve, they become bigger emitters of greenhouse gases. I mean, this is the reason why China is today the largest polluter, because they have been able to pull a lot of people out of poverty. And as people get out of poverty, their demand for infrastructure goes up, their demand for higher protein content in the food goes up, and all of these leads to greater greenhouse gases. So India has to be a leading country to find this solution, that how we can pull people out of poverty and yet do it in a environmentally sustainable manner. So while the inclusive business models are talking about financial sustainability, now there is an additional complexity or additional challenge of being also environmentally sustainable. And I think that's the future. That's the future of inclusive business models, where you cannot take these two problems separately. They are two sides of probably the same problem. And the reality in of life is, unfortunate reality of life is that the adverse impact of climate change will first impact the poor. I mean, look at what is happening today in our country. If there is a cloudburst in Himachal Pradesh or in Uttarakhand, who are the ones who are getting impacted most? If there is flooding in Orissa, then who are the ones who are first getting impacted? It's always the people who are living on the fringes. So the impact of climate change and poverty has to be looked together.
Professor Sourav Mukherjee, it's been a privilege hearing your thoughts today. Inclusive business models not only deepen our understanding of how businesses can serve marginalized communities, but also challenges us to rethink the very purpose of enterprise. Your book serves as a both guide and an inspiration for students, entrepreneurs, and managers seeking to build businesses that truly transform lives. Thank you once again, Professor Sourav Mukherjee, for joining us today.
Nice talking to you, Deepak. Best of luck.
Thank you.